Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here on the Royal House of Ra. I am your host, Amenhotep Khufu El Ra. Today's show is going to be on the Second Intermediate Period, and we will be discussing Dynasties 15, 16, and 17. Now, the 15th dynasty was the Hyksos dynasty. So we're going to discuss that, how the rise of the Hyksos, and then we're going to go into Dynasty 16th, and then we're going to go into Dynasty 17th, which is the Thieves Dynasty, the Theban dynasty, the rise of the Theban dynasty, the 17th. Now, the 17th dynasty is an indigenous dynasty to Kemet. The Hyksos, the 15th dynasty, was not a indigenous dynasty. It was a invader dynasty that took over, that ruled in the northern region of Kemet when they came in. But we're going to go into that, and we're going to talk about that and how that came in being and what was the political struggles of that time. Now, as I mentioned, this is the Second Intermediate Period. Now, also, these dynasties I mentioned, the 15th, 16th, and 17th dynasties, were not the only dynasties of the Second Intermediate Period. Now, when I had discussed Dynasty 13th and 14th in episode 16, the Dynasties 13 and 14 was also part of the Second Intermediate Period. They were the beginning, those dynasties were the beginning of the Second Intermediate Period, and the Dynasties 15th, 16th, and 17th was at the end of the Second Intermediate Period. Now, after this period, the Second Intermediate Period, we're going to go into another period. I'll discuss that a little bit after that. So, I can mention it here now, because after this, the Second Intermediate Period will be the New Kingdom. And this was the rulers of an empire. This is the golden age of empire in Kemet, which is the New Kingdom. So we were going to go into that. Now, before I go any further, I'd like to thank those who subscribe to the show. Continue your support. Share the content with others. Click onto that like button, and also subscribe and hit the notifications when you hear when a new show appears. Now, remember, all these shows are live, and I always mention when they're going to start. Now, the next show would be episode 18, and that would air on Thursday, March 10th at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and 12 p.m. Pacific Time. So you know when that air, and it's going to air live. So look forward for that. Remember, March 10th, and that will be discussing the Empire Age, the Age of Empire, episode 18. Okay, so let's get into today's show. Hold on for just a moment. All right, I am ready. So let's get into today's show right now. Okay, now what I'm going to do is name the pharaohs of these dynasties, and then we're going to move forward into Dynasties 15, the Hyksos. They had governed Kemet from 1663 BC to 1555 BC. The pharaohs of this dynasty was Sheshi, was the first pharaoh. Then you had Yakubher. Then you had Khyan. Then you had Apepi I and Apepi II. Now, the 16th dynasty governed Kemet from 1663 BC to 1555 BC. Now, I believe they were part of the Hyksos dynasty, but let's go into that. The pharaohs of the 16th dynasty was Anather and Yakobaam. Now, Dynasty 17 is the Theban dynasty, the Indigenous dynasty, and they reigned. They governed from 1663 BC to 1570 BC. Now you have to remember, even though the Hyksos they invaded and they governed mostly the northern part of Kemet. The Thebans governed the southern part. So the country was divided into two separate entities. So we're going to go into that. So the pharaohs of the 17th dynasty is Sobekemsaf II, Intef VII, Tao I, Tao II, and Kamose. Remember, Kamose is who we want to see. Okay, and Kamose, he reigned between 1573 BC to 1570 BC. Tao II reigned 1574 BC, and Tao I reigned 1637 BC. The other two have no periods when they reigned. This is the same with the 15th and 16th dynasty. They shows no period they reigned. Most likely because it was kind of short-lived. All right, so let's get into this. Metho's account of this period is preserved at great length in Contra Aponium by a Jewish historian, Josephus. But it must be remembered that Metho's was writing as a Greco-Egyptian about the greatest disaster that ever struck ancient Kemet, ruled by foreign nationals, while later Kemetan records suggest a great invasion of a desperate horde through the eastern delta. In reality, Semitic immigrants had been steadily entering Kemet for some time. This is evident not only from the names recorded on Middle Kingdom still and in some lists of servants, but also from the 12th dynasty paintings of Asiatics in the tomb of the noble Khanum Hotep II at Beni Hassan in Middle Kemet. These settlers gradually acquired increasing authority, but it was not until late in the 18th century BC that they began to extend their rule beyond their base at Avaris, the modern Tel El Dabel, currently being excavated by Manfred Bistek of the University of Vienna. Excuse me. The 5, possibly 6 main Hyksos rulers identified by Mythos are allocated a span of 108 years in the Turan Papyrus, the lengths of their individual reigns being uncertain. Unfortunately, most of the Turan Papyrus is damaged, and the figure given for Sheshi, the numerical founder, may be 13 or 23 years. Likewise, his successor, Yakubher, may have reigned for either 8 or 18 years. The longest reigning king was the 4th in the sequence, Apepi I, also known as Apophis, who ruled for about 40 years. The Hyksos sacked the Khmetan capital of Memphis in about 1720 BC, but they still preferred to operate from their eastern delta strongholds such as Aphras and Tel El Yahut Yahi. Appropriately for a people associated with the desert, they choose as their preeminent deity a god of the desert wastes, Seth. They also introduce other foreign gods and goddesses from their Phoenician homelands, such as the mother goddess Astarte and the storm and war god Resha. Diplomatic relations outside Kemet at Tel El Aphras in the northern eastern delta, there is evidence from the recent excavations of terrible destruction wrought upon the palaces there. Incredible Minion-style wall paintings, fragments which might even predate the Minions, frescoes at Notos or Crete, have been found scattered in a garden area at the site, testifying not only to the intensity of the onslaught, but more importantly to connections with the Minions artistic world. Another Cretan connection is a circular alabaster jar lead found in the palace of Knossos, inscribed with the cartouche of the third Hyksos king, Khyan. His name has also been found in a graffiti inscription scratched on the shoulder of a red granite Middle Kingdom Khajent Sphinx, which was curiously found in Baghdad. Khyan is better known from inscribed material than his brother kings, most of whom are only known from the scribes, which are the characteristic artifacts of the dynasty. Records for the period of the Hyksos are sparse, probably due to two main factors. First, their influence was largely confined to the delta and the northern areas of Kemet, where they had their center of authority. Secondly, to have foreign rulers was regarded as a terrible thing in ancient Kemet, and once the essential equilibrium had been restored, there was a definite movement of natural material, and Hyksos monuments would have been obliterated or destroyed. The 16th dynasty, minor kings who almost certainly operated in the shadows of and by the authority of the Hyksos rulers at Aphras, produces only two names, Anather and Yakobaam, which do not occur in cartouches and are largely only known from the scribes found in northern Kemet and southern Palestine. The rise of the 17th dynasty. While the Hyksos kings assumed control in the north of the country, a line of rulers, the 17th dynasty, was evolving in Thebes. The Theban kings ruled an area from Elaphanite to Abydos, and in spite of the scant resources at their disposal, they largely succeeded in preserving the culture of the Middle Kingdom. The earlier rulers of the dynasty made no apparent attempt to challenge the authority of the Hyksos. An uneasy truth truce existed between the two lineages from some time. Evidence of this comes from a fragmentary letter now in the British Museum, in which the Hyksos king Apepi I complains to his Theban counterpart, Sequiner Tao, that he was unable to sleep in avarice because of the roaring of hippopotami 500 miles, 800 kilometers away at Thieves, and suggests that Tao do something about it. Sadly, the end of the tale is not preserved. Later members of the Theban dynasty were more militant and rose against the Hyksos in a series of battles which were eventually to force the interlopers from Kemet. Tao himself was probably killed in one of the battles, since his mummy discovered in the royal cache at Deir al-Bahari in 1881 shows evidence of terrible wounds about the head. His death was not in vain, for it was one of his sons, Atmos, who was finally to drive out the Hyksos and found the 18th dynasty. Many of the first kings of the 17th dynasty were known as Intef, and their large and heavy coffins with vulture wings featured decorations called Sheshi coffins have been found at Thieves in the area of the Dra Abu el Naga on the west bank. The tombs themselves were poor cut into a Theban hillside and usually marked by steep-sided brick-built pyramids. The tomb of another 17th dynasty king, Sobekemsaf II, had apparently remained intact until the reign of the 20th dynasty king Ramses IX, when a certain Amun Petnufer and a gang of 7 accomplices robbed the burial of the king and his queen Nukais in about 1124 BC. A green stone hard scrap set in gold inscribed on the base for a Sakapa himself may refer to this king. Now in the British Museum, it was acquired in the 19th century with the coffin of his successor Nubkai Kapere Intef. They were possibly found together, in which case the scribe may have been in a reused context. The expulsion of the Hyksos. The simmering hostilities between the Thebans and their northern rivals erupted, as we have seen, during the reign of Tao and his son Kamose. Was to continue the battle for complete sovereignty of Kemet. The official account of Kamose campaign is related on 2 still from Karnak. The first survives only in a much damaged condition, but fortunately the introductory text is known from another source, a writing board now in the British Museum known as the Carnarvon tablet. A preamble of the first still outlines the current situation in Kemet. The country was normally at peace, with Kamose holding the middle areas, the Hyksos controlling the north, the princes of Kush in command south of Elphinite, Unsurprisingly, the court could not see why Kamose should wish to upset the status quo, but the king was determined to march. According to the still, Kamose had some success by virtue of the element of surprise. The Hyksos had not apparently expected to be attacked outright. However, the king's reign was short, no more than 3 regional years being recorded, and he was buried at Thebes in an unpretentious Sheshi type coffin that was found in 1857, buried in rubble near where his tomb was recorded by inspectors under Ramses IX. The account of the struggles against the Hyksos is continued in a small private tomb at El Kab, just to the north of Aswan. Carved in vertical columns of hieroglyphs, metaneta, immediately inside the entrance is the autobiography of a local noble of the city of Nekhab, Ahmose, son of Ibana. It is the only contemporary account extant of the final defeat of the Hyksos. Ahmose served in the army under Kamose, successor Ahmose I. The new king resumed the war with the Hyksos about halfway through his 24th reign. His 24th year reign, leading a series of attacks against Memphis, Avaris, and other Hyksos strongholds. Ahmose, son of Ibana, not only took part in the siege of Avaris, the second and third battles of Avaris, and the cities eventually captured, but also pursued the beleaguered Hyksos into Palestine and laid siege to their town of Sharahan. At last, after a hard-fought campaign, the Hyksos were expelled from Kemet, and the princely line of Thebes, in the person of Ahmose I, inaugurated the 18th dynasty and the new kingdom. So there you go, folks. This is what happened. How the Hyksos was expelled. Now, Ahmose is the first pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. Now, he was a general under Kamose, who was the last pharaoh of the 17th dynasty. So the fight between the hold on for a moment. The fight to remove the Hyksos started in the 17th dynasty. It was 2 pharaohs. Tao was that was Tao II, and then it was Kamose. Tao II started, but he suffered a bad, serious injury. He was killed in one of the battles that he was fighting with the Hyksos, and he suffered very terrible head blows. His son took on the mantle, Kamose, to carry on the fight against the Hyksos. He had some successes, but when he had died, his general Ahmose, who was the son of Ibana, took on the mantle and kicked out the Hyksos, really drove them all the way to their homeland in Palestine, and defeated them there. And then he was the founder of the 18th dynasty. Now, this Thursday, March 10th, we're going to discuss about the rulers of an empire, the New Kingdom, which the New Kingdom started at 1570 BC to 1070 BC. And there are 3 dynasties that are part of the Empire Age, part of the New Kingdom. The Empire Age is the New Kingdom. And these dynasties are Dynasty 18 and Dynasty 19th and Dynasty 20. Now, Dynasty 20 is part of this empire. And this is the dynasty I am a descendant of. I'm the descendant of Ramses III, who is the second pharaoh of this dynasty. But I'm also a descendant of his father because my bloodline is in there. So I am his descendant. For those of you who looked at the first episode, in the first episode I show the evidence of my DNA evidence where I am the descendant of Ramses III of the 20th dynasty. But we're going to go into this period, which is the New Kingdom, the rise of the empire. This is the Empire Age. This is the zenith of the Kemetan civilization. So we're going to get on to that on Thursday. Once again, thank you all for tuning in to the show. I hope that you enjoyed it and you learned from it. Like I mentioned, it does not cost you any money to like, share, and subscribe. Once again, thank you for tuning in to the Royal House of Ra. I am your host, Amen Hotep Khufu El Ra, and I look forward in seeing all of you again this Thursday. Take care and enjoy the rest of your evening.